It seems like these days, we Americans are divided about just about everything. There's almost nothing we share in common. But I think there is one thing we do share in common, and that is that political polarization is extremely harmful and tearing us apart. But what exactly is the problem with being so politically divided? In this video, I'm going to share 3 key negative effects of polarization, but I will not leave you there because I'm also going to offer 3 specific things you can do to reduce polarization. Let's start with the first of these really negative effects of polarization. And that is that polarization tends to lead to demonization and dehumanization of the other side. So what do I mean by that? Well, the more polarized we are, the more we have this tendency to see those who have opposite viewpoints on a particular issue as less than human. And when we demonize them in that way, it makes us easier to actually inflict harm on them and to care less about them. So there's a whole bunch of research on this tendency. So one piece of research talks about something that is called the lone moderate effect. Well, what is the lone moderate effect? Well, if you ask people, let's say pro-life people, to describe their views on abortion, they will describe themselves as having relatively reasonable views. They describe the other people in their side as having more extreme views than they do. But then they describe people on the pro-choice side to have views that are far more radical than in fact most pro-choice people really have. So what has happened is we turn the other side into a cartoon character. We say, I'm the lone moderate, I'm the reasonable person. The other people on my side are a little bit crazy, but you know what? Who's the most crazy? The people on the other side. And so that demonization, that dehumanization, makes it easier to use language that increases the likelihood of violence, that takes away our shared purpose as a nation, as a people, and that causes a huge amount of tension and anxiety because instead of seeing other people as simply having different views, we see them as actually threats. And I would just say in the last election, the 2022 election, we saw this demonization and dehumanization on both sides. When one side is basically saying democracy is at stake in this election, the message is basically the monsters on the other side are so bad that they will take away our fundamental rights in a democracy. And when the other side says something like, save America, the implication is that people who are Democrats are literally going to destroy the country. And so this demonization and dehumanization is so problematic. This leads to the second real challenge, which is it makes collaborating to solve shared problems even more difficult. I think most Americans actually see issues like climate or guns or immigration or national security as shared issues. Now, when we prioritize those issues might differ from where we sit politically, but personally, I don't know anyone who says, I don't think gun violence is an issue in this country. And I don't think I know anyone who says the United States has a completely well-functioning immigration system. I don't know anyone who says one thing that's working really, really well right now in our country is the cost of healthcare. Almost all of us agree that these are real shared problems. But what we can do very well is come together and actually solve those problems together. Instead, both sides tend to actually make the views of the other side seem to be part of the problem. And any attempt to work across our lines of difference is seen as betrayal is seen as being a traitor, is seen as speaking outside of what our in-group says we should be doing. And so polarization makes shared, collaborative problem solving across lines of difference very, very hard to do. And in fact, when it happens, it's this kind of rare, almost unbelievable moment. The third effect of polarization is really much closer to home. And I think many of us have felt it. And it just is about more stress and tension in our personal relationships and in our collective civic life. So think about holidays and coming together around a holiday. Now, that always brings a bunch of stresses around relationship styles and past slights, et cetera, et cetera. But in the past decade, what we've seen is this stress around what happens if a political conversation comes up. How will I deal with that? Recently I was listening to some old cassette recordings I have of my uncle and my dad debating at Easter time the merits and demerits of nuclear power in the United States. They recorded this in the 80s, and they actually recorded a whole bunch of these conversations where they had different views. It's so amazing to hear these conversations, not because either of them were brilliant or right or wrong or persuasive, but just because they were able to have these conversations. And my grandfather, so the father of my uncle and my father, would moderate these conversations. Now I think families go into holidays thinking, oh my gosh, we can't talk about X, Y, or Z, because we feel that the whole relationship is at stake. And so polarization raises tensions. We also see the effects of this around mental health, around depression, around people describing higher levels of feeling lonely and isolated. So, with all of these negative attributes of polarization, what are 3 key steps you can take to reduce polarization in your own life and hopefully in your community and in our society? First, work to enhance your own curiosity about people who are different than you. I'm somebody whose work is all about partisan perceptions. It is all about trying to spark curiosity from people on one side in the conflict about people on the other side. And I would say even for me, at times, it can become very hard to be curious about somebody who holds views that I think are simply outside the bounds of acceptability or reality. And yet that work is incredibly important to do if we're to reduce polarization. And a lot of that is internal work. I can't make you more curious. Only you can make yourself more curious. And the only way you can do that is if you hold open the possibility that you are not the expert of everything in the universe, and that you are definitely not the expert on the thoughts, experiences, feelings, and story of the other person. And as soon as we can make that shift, it opens up some space for curiosity. Second, and related to this, is to actively build relationships with those who are outside of your political bubble. Now, there are all sorts of ways to do that. You can go onto a social media platform and purposefully look for people who have different views than your own. You can join some kind of community organization where you know that they're a diverse set of people with different views as a part of that organization. It's even possible in your workplace that there are likely people who have political views that are different from your own. What would it be like to have as one of your tasks in the next month to identify 2 people, whether it's in your church, in your synagogue, in your workplace, in your community, in your family, who you know have some views that are different from your own, and to reach out to them and suggest a conversation or getting together, or maybe just a conversation about their views on political polarization. That may sound very academic, but my own experience is that when we do that, our views don't shift, but our story about the other does, and it reduces demonization and it reduces polarization. Lastly, in those situations when you feel absolutely certain that you're right and the other side is wrong. This is an invitation to listen more and to talk less. Let me end with a story that starts in a very tragic way with a pro-life advocate murdering a pro-choice doctor in Boston. This story in the early 2000s becomes a huge issue in Boston. And at this moment of incredibly high tension, a number of pro-choice and pro-life women come together for a series of regular dialogues around abortion. And when they make this decision, the people in their own camp are extremely critical of their decision to do this. For 15 years, these dialogues between pro-choice and pro-life women continue. They develop these friendships. They do not change their views on this issue, but they find all sorts of shared and common ground, and to this day have become an example of the ability to find connection, dialogue across lines of difference, and prevent demonization and polarization. Each of us has it in our power to do this. So in order to reduce polarization, take these 3 steps. Enhance your own curiosity about people who are different than you. Actively build relationships with those outside of your political bubble. And when in doubt, listen more and talk less. To learn more about political polarization, watch this next video, which is How Does Political Polarization Lead to Gridlock in Congress? In addition, please like this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel so you keep getting more of this content, and of course, ring the bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new video. Okay, click, 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 keep watching. Don't leave now.